So I want to move on to Oldbury Brook and invite Andy down to the stage. He's been working on Oldbury Brook since January, and they've made huge progress down there. So Andy's talking a little about the work that they've done to date, and then Rob will talk about the next steps.
Can I do it reverse order?
Yeah, do you want to start?
Effectively, the area that we're talking about is at the very western end of the existing canal. And I think, as John said earlier, this part was obliterated when they put the motorway in. Predominant reason for that was to stop the water that was flowing down, getting down to the motorway junction and flooding it. And there was also the River Frome, which is already down there, and probably if you're a local, you'll know that that floods too. So there was a drive to try and keep the area around the motorway junction and around the River Frome dry. So their answer was that originally, you can see the very end of the pound in the bottom here, that currently was where the actual canal finished. It's difficult to see, but below it is a brook, which we call Oldbury Brook, hence the naming of the new housing development. I think it's called Oldbury, just off the roundabout at Eastington. And so that brook used to flow into the canal and supplied water to it. And then that flowed on down to Whitminster. So obviously when they cut the canal, they had to divert the water from the brook. And the way they did that was effectively to cut straight across the front of the lock that John described earlier. And then you can't really see it, but as it moves out the top of the frame, they dug an artificial ditch or brook, water course, that then diverts the water down to the River Frome. And that's actually how it goes out. There was an existing overspill, which again, centre picture, you can't really see it, but there's like an oval dark shape. And that is effectively the overspill that was in operation, that worked in combination with John Robinson Lock, that allowed any excess water from the operation of the canal to flow again. That flows out to the River Frome as well. So our challenge really was, how do we connect the old pound to John Robinson Lock that then passes under Westfield Bridge and then effectively ends, and that's what we call the missing mile that moves on from that. I'm not going to talk about that. But actually, the challenge was, how do we get the brook from one side of the canal to the other and create enough height or depth, depending on which way you want to look at it, to create a navigable channel for boats to pass over. So the original scheme was what we called an aqueduct. So you will hear us using the word aqueduct, and then we'll talk about brook. But effectively, an aqueduct was a bit like a siphon. So the idea was to siphon the water underneath the bed of the canal, and that's something that's done not a huge amount of canal construction, but is used. But it's notoriously difficult, because if you get air into a siphon, it will stop. So it will then potentially flood. So we were really keen not to be in that situation. So after we looked at it and we undertook a bit of a design review, there was two things that we really wanted to try and achieve. One was that we were using gravity to flow the water, i.e. we could just put it through pipes. And the second was that we could construct it ourselves. If we'd have constructed it as a siphon, we would have had to get specialist contractors in. And again, that is expensive, and anybody that has had any work done on their house, you all know how much these things cost. So with our budget, we want to stretch it as far as we can. And so obviously, one of the things that we could do, if we could design it in such a way that the volunteers then, with the skill sets they have, and they are a really good set of skills, can actually construct it, it would achieve a really key objective, which is value for money, and also maintaining the volunteers' engagement in doing really, really difficult, challenging jobs, should I say, but obviously ultimately giving everybody a fantastic sense of achievement, because what they've done is pretty hardcore civils work. As an ex-civil engineer myself, I know that. So what we did effectively was change the design from a concrete reinforced structure to basically 3 jumbo pipes. And those pipes were basically sized to allow the water to pass in a 1 in 1,000 year storm event, plus 37% climate change. So although the brook itself looks tiny in most events, it is a level 3, I think it's a zone 3 floodplain, if I've got that wrong, which means it's very sensitive to flooding. So we have to make sure there's enough capacity in the pipes for it not to flood, because what it would happen is if it did flood, it would back up the lane, and eventually it would back up over the roundabout at Eastington and back into the housing estate. So clearly that's not a good thing to do. And we worked through it with a series of designers to enable us to get to a situation where the construction that we've actually chosen, and what Andy's going to describe, is effectively a gravity-fed, culverted system that allows us to take the water under the brook. We then, once we've basically put the pipes in, we fill the whole area with clay. Again, what we've tried to do is follow the original Georgian engineering principles. So they use puddle clay. Some canal refurbishments have used what they call a clay liner or a bentonite sheet, which basically is a waterproof layer. But clay is really good. So as long as you've got the right sort of clay, it's pretty cheap and we've got lots of it. So the idea is that we then join the pound that you can see just to the right of the excavator. We can line that new pound as we create it into the front of John Robinson with clay, and that will then join the pound to John Robinson, and I believe that will be the first time that that's been done since the motorway, so what, 50, 60 years ago. And that will effectively recreate all the pounds that survived the motorway and the time and the ravages of history that the canal's undergone since it was abandoned in the mid-50s. From my point of view, that's really just enough about the principles and how we've approached it and how we try to optimise both the skill sets we have and the money that we're given, because obviously the money we're given is very precious. I'll let now Andy talk about how he's actually gone about building it.
Thanks, Rob. So when we first looked at this, it was originally full of willow tree roots. So where you can see where the white van's parked, from there down to the footbridge was basically old willow trees. So our first little task was to get down there and drag the willow tree roots out. If you've ever seen a 14-ton excavator resting with a willow tree that's been there for so many years it doesn't want to move, it's quite a sight, and the sound effects of the mud slowly giving way are not very pleasant at times, along with the aroma. So we've cleared a groove ditch from the top of, if I point to it, we can show you, from here down to just about there. Don't ask me how much soil we moved, but we had 2 6-ton dumpers running about 30 to 40 trips a day for the best part of 2 to 3 weeks. So you can work your maths out how much dirt we've moved.
It's 2,500 cube, or roughly 4,000 tons.
That's why he's an engineer and I'm just a volunteer. There's been effectively 4 of us working down there. It's myself, a chap called Scottish Andy, who is probably one of the best and highest skilled machine drivers I think we've got. We've got Pat and we've got another chap who joined us called Dave, and the 4 of us have basically taken that one as a challenge and cracked on with it. Without Andy's skills and Dave's digger skills, I think we'd be really, really struggling. So we've dug out approximately 50 metres of path to lay the pipes. Once we got down to that level, we realised it wasn't going to be as simple as we initially thought, as the ground there has been made up over years. We had some places which were nice and solid, and other places where you put the digger and the digger started to disappear. Quite entertaining, so we had to dig it all out and then go back, fill it with stone. I'd hate to think, Stuart might know how many tons of stone we've buried down there, but we were getting through 200 tons of stone a week to get that level. And
just
build.
For the purposes of 1,000 tons so far.
Well, there you go, mate. That's why he does numbers. So we dug the trench out, laid as solid a base on it as we could, and then we've put in 3 600mm corrugated reinforced pipes, 40 metres long from end to end. So we've had to put them in, join them, and get them covered over. We then came across the task of covering them over with stone. So 1,000 ton of stone is basically just covered over the pipes, which is the grey area you can see through the middle. This week, we actually got to the point of casting the head walls. So we poured about 4.3 metres of concrete in to create the head walls around the pipes to take to guide the water down the pipes. And next week, we should start laying the apron, the sill, whatever it's called, in front of the pipes and at the back end of the pipes to guide the water in. Once that's done, we'll be doing a flow test. So it'll be taking either siphoning some water from the other side of the dam, making sure it goes down the pipe, or pumping it down the pipe to check it comes out the other end. If we've got a leak in the middle, don't ask me what we do, because I really don't want to know. We do have one quite significant challenge to overcome in the next couple of weeks. So just, you see the footbridge, just looking at the picture, up from the footbridge is the old Oldbury Brook course. The ground level is higher than the water level for the base of the pipes. So we've now got to go down Oldbury Brook and lower Oldbury Brook by best part of a foot in places, which doesn't sound a lot, but to give you an idea, we got the 3.5 ton, we got a little digger in there on Wednesday, sorry, and it promptly sunk. So the ground down there is not as good as we thought it was. It looks like gravel, you scrape the gravel off, and what's underneath in. Yeah, your expression says everything. It's been a challenging job, and it's also been very frustrating. Part of the frustration that has come, we initially thought we weren't being told what we need to know, but as we started to dig away the infill from the last 50 years, you know, we didn't know what we were going to hit, we didn't know what we were going to find. We found some quite significant pieces of concrete that needed dragging out, and if you take a walk down towards this and look on the left-hand side, there's a old concrete structure that we had to drag out, and that probably weighs about 7 or 8 ton in its own, so that had to come out of the brook and get it out of the way. So finding that, unearthing it, was quite a challenge. We also had to take away the old footpath and the old bridge that went across to the left-hand side of the lock. That had to be broken out, and there was a sill in the old brook that was allegedly only about this thick, Andy. You'll break it nice and easy. Yeah, 400 mil later of reinforced concrete and all the rest of it, and we're still trying to break through it. So that all had to be got out. All of this slowed us down. It's things nobody could have foresaw. It has very much been a voyage of discovery as we've worked our way down. But we're now in a situation where, all being well, in the next couple of weeks, we can start backfilling again. So all that soil that came out is going to go back in. So if we've got any volunteer dumper truck drivers or anybody who's good with a spade, you know what you can do. Are there any questions?
The question was, what impact will this have on the water flows coming down Oldbury Brook, and how will that impact the canal and the River Frome? So what we're doing here is that actually, you can see on the left-hand side where we create the pipes, is that we're not changing at all the flow of water that goes down Oldbury Brook. That will continue down the brook into the River Frome. So we're making no change whatsoever here. The water will continue to go to the River Frome. But the key thing is now is that the water will continue to flow down the canal, but we're not going to use the water from the Oldbury Brook into the canal. So does that answer your question? Yeah, thank you.